All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this completely spontaneous pricing tutorial. Today, I decided this morning to jump on the Facebook group and just kind of do a fun, light-hearted, easy, no RSVPs, no pre-planning. We're just going to price a recipe today. So if you're interested in learning how to price your recipes, then this is the live stream for you to watch. So I'm going to give everybody just a couple of minutes to join. I want to welcome you guys if you're watching from YouTube or on Facebook. I can see your comments in Facebook. I can't see your comments in YouTube. So please forgive me if I don't answer them live on YouTube. But jump on over to the comments and say hello. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing here today, maybe about 25 minutes of recipe costing and some pricing tips. So yesterday in the Home Bakery Business Tips Facebook group, we had a member comment some pricing questions, and then a few other comments about some pricing theories, we're going to call them. And the name of that Facebook group is Home Bakery Business Tips. And literally the most important business skill that you need to master is how to price your baked goods. And it's usually the first one. You already know how to bake. You might be perfecting your craft, but chances are if you're starting your home bakery, then you already love baking and you're probably pretty good at it. But the business side of things is why we have this Facebook group together. And that's the kind of information we share. So I could tell from those comments that we needed to have a little bit more information about how to price accurately. Because if you're not pricing accurately, then there's not going to be enough money left at the end of the month from your sales and from all of those efforts that you're putting into to get your baking business off the ground. There won't be enough money left at the end of the month for you to do things like pay yourself. And that is kind of why we do it, right? If you can't pay yourself, then it's just an expensive hobby. And not everybody has the perspective to be able to do this as a hobby. So many of you have told me that you're doing this because you really want to make an income from it, part-time or full-time. And in order to do that, you have to price your baked goods for a profit so that at the end of the month, you have some leftover money and you can pay yourself for your efforts. So what we're going to do today is price a recipe together. And as I do this, I'm going to share some of the strategies that you can take to your recipe and cost it yourself. So there's 5 of them. We're going to do them together. And these are going to make sure that you cover all of the bases. So over in the Facebook group this morning, I asked, what would you like to see me cost? And it was a close call. I asked for cinnamon rolls, chocolate chip cookies, and pumpkin bread. And the majority of you asked to see a cinnamon roll recipe get priced, but a lot of you asked for cookies too. So let me know in the comments as we're going through this. If you want to see more videos like this, I'd be happy to do them. So let's jump right in and start to talk about how we cost a recipe. So there are 5 major elements to pricing your recipe that we're going to be talking about. And before we kind of jump into those 5, I want to kind of like raise an awareness for you that the like rule of thumb kind of pricing that's pretty popular when you don't really know how to do it. Well, I generally charge 3 times my cost and I seem to do okay because that's what I hear other people saying. I'm curious if you've ever heard those and if you've ever even used them. A really popular one is 3 times your cost for pricing. And I'm going to show you why that actually doesn't work. And if you do that, you're going to lose money 99% of the time. So the reason, as an overview, the reason that doesn't work is picture a home baker who sells sourdough bread and a home baker who sells a brownie. So if you are the baker who sells sourdough bread, your cost on a loaf of bread is probably less than $1 because bread has so few ingredients. It's sourdough bread, it takes time, but it doesn't take a lot of money up front. Okay, so there's this baker who takes their ingredient costs and multiplies them by 3. Let's just say for the sake of simplicity that it costs this baker $1 in her ingredients to bake a loaf of sourdough bread. If this baker used that 3x your cost recipe or rule of thumb, then that would be selling that loaf for $3. It doesn't take into account any of the labor that goes into the bread. And then let's talk about a baker who sells brownies. If you cost out a brownie recipe based on your ingredients, then your ingredients for a chocolate chip or a chocolate brownie might cost you about 50 cents a piece. And if you did 3x that, then you'd be at like $1.50 a brownie. And you might think that sounds pretty good. But actually, when I ran my brownie recipe through my recipe spreadsheet, which I'm going to show you here in a second, it comes out to be more like $2.50 a brownie. And you might think that doesn't sound like that much, but at the end of the month, if you're undercharging by 20%, 25%, that's what you should be paying yourself, and you're not. So today I just kind of want to dispel that myth that you could take a rule of thumb and just apply it to any baker, because it really doesn't work for different bakers. We need to take these 5 key elements and put them in our recipe. So good morning to everyone who's joining. Thank you for jumping in the comments and saying hello. I'm excited to do this recipe with you, and thanks for watching. If you have questions while we're going, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll try to answer them as I go. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And the way that I am going to talk about this is by putting my numbers on a spreadsheet. You don't have to use a spreadsheet to price your recipes. You can do this by hand, but I love a good spreadsheet. So that's how I'm going to be doing it. And you'll see these different concepts as we talk about them. So let's jump right in. So first of all, I want to be totally transparent. Let me move where my face is here. In fact, I'll make it go away for a second. Okay. So on this spreadsheet, I did go ahead and set it up beforehand. And I have this list of my entire inventory. This is everything that I buy in my home bakery. And I notate like the size of the container and then how much I paid for it. And so I already went ahead and entered that. So it's going to look super easy while I'm doing this because I did a little bit of that setup work ahead of time. So we're going to price a cinnamon roll recipe. And so this is a pretty generic cinnamon roll. It's not generic, it's delicious, but it doesn't have any crazy ingredients. There's nothing tricky going on here. We're going to start entering the dough, and I'm going to enter everything in ounces. So I'm just going to enter yeast. I have 1 ounce of yeast in my recipe. And because I'm using this spreadsheet that's already set up like that, it pulls that cost over from the inventory tab that I showed you. So I have 39 cents worth of yeast in that recipe. And this is the first step of pricing your ingredients, is to know how much they cost by weight and converting your recipe over to weight. It'd be really hard for me to say a half a cup of milk based on buying a gallon of milk. I prefer to work in ounces. You can work in grams, but I recommend converting your recipes over to weight when you want to begin pricing them. It's just like comparing apples to apples. All right, so there's 2.8 ounces of butter. Then I've got sugar. We're working on the dough here. The sugar that I put in is 4 ounces of sugar. And you can see on the blue column on the right, I'm starting to total up the different ingredient costs in this recipe. And I like this because you can kind of see what's your most expensive ingredient and how much of your recipe is going to that. So far, you can see that it's my butter and vanilla in this cinnamon roll recipe that are the most expensive. That's probably not a surprise to you or to me, because we know that Those are the more expensive ingredients that we use. Salt is 0.2 of an ounce. And then my recipe also has 2 eggs in it. And then I've got flour, and it has 20 ounces of all-purpose flour in it. Okay, so that's the dough part of the recipe. And now I'm going to go ahead and enter the filling. And so I'm going to just continue like right on this same spreadsheet. For the filling in my cinnamon roll, there we go. For the filling in my cinnamon roll, I just use brown sugar, butter, and cinnamon. So let's enter another butter measurement, because I had some in the dough, but now I am doing the butter in the filling, and that's 2.8 ounces. And the brown sugar in my filling is 8 ounces. And then the cinnamon. So now if you were doing this by hand, what I would recommend is that you have a master list like I do, this inventory list here, where you just keep a running list of everything that you buy in your business and the current price for it. So that is how this is going so quickly, is because I already have that list put together. Okay, so we've got my dough, my cinnamon roll dough entered in, and now I've got the amount of filling that I use. And the last step is the icing. So for my icing, I do powdered sugar, and that's 6 ounces. I've got some more butter in my icing, and I have 2.4. And let's see, what else? I've got milk in my icing. I'm lucky to live in a state where I can do that. I've got 3 ounces of milk in there. And then I've got vanilla. And I did 0.15. That's like a tablespoon of vanilla. Okay, so there is the raw part of the recipe. It's the dough, the filling, and the icing. And all of the amounts are in the same unit. That makes it easier to compare apples to apples. And then in the spreadsheet that I use, it pulls those costs over from that inventory. By the way, if you want to get this spreadsheet, I think I stuck a link in the description above the video. Okay, so here's where it starts to get good. Now, we have to kind of divide this up into serving sizes. So what I'm going to do here is just sell these individually. There's so many ways that you can sell cinnamon rolls, and you can sell them in 4-packs and 6-packs, like there's a lot of different ways. But for this example, I'm just going to say I'm selling these as 12. And then I need to add the packaging. So for my example, I'm going to package it in a clamshell with 1 logo sticker. So I use a plastic clamshell. Now I'm making 12 of these. So I need to use 12 clamshells, right? I'm going to make myself smaller so you guys can really see the spreadsheet here. So I put 12 clamshells on because I'm pricing the entire batch. And then I'm going to have like a logo label that has my logo and my ingredients all in one. So I'm going to use 12 of those. And those are all of my costs that go into making that recipe. So right down here at the bottom, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it says $14.84. That's how much it cost me in ingredients only to make this, the cinnamon rolls. All right, so now let's keep going. And here is where we're going to look at this recipe and start to mark it up for profit. Because as I was saying at the beginning, if you're just multiplying your cost times 3, you're not going to be having enough profit built in. So over here to the right, I have kind of put together this little thing that helps me break down the profit, and I'll explain it to you as we go. So it just carries this number over. The $14.84 was the total cost of my recipe. So we've included our ingredients, we've included our packaging and labeling, and I'm curious if anybody knows, if anybody has any guesses on what is missing from our price right now. We've got ingredients and packaging and labeling. If you have a guess, drop it in the comments. I'm curious to see how profit savvy you guys are. Okay, so let's continue on. We need to talk about the time it took us to make that recipe. So you need to include the time that you bake as part of your costs. I have one guess for overhead, and you're right, that's one of the things that's not in there. There's a couple that aren't in there yet. So one of them I just mentioned, and that's your labor. So now we're not talking about your labor to run your home bakery business, the CEO of your business, all of the marketing and shopping and social media that you do for your business. We're strictly talking about making these cinnamon rolls as if you were on the clock working for someone else. How much time did you put in to make these? So I am going to say that it takes me 45 minutes worth of active labor. I don't use the time that it's in the oven. I'm going to say 45 minutes, and I'm just going to put down like a basic hourly rate. This could be something that's sort of competitive in your area. $15 for me sounds good. Couple good guesses here. We have overhead, labor, and profit. Whoever that user is, absolutely bonus points for you. That is exactly what's missing from that recipe right now. So we just added in the labor. Now it's time to mark it up for profit. And the way I do it is I do overhead at the end. You can do it differently, but that's just the way I kind of set up the spreadsheet to work. So right now, the pricing calculator is telling me the total cost to make that recipe is $14.84. If I take 45 minutes at $15 an hour, then my ingredient cost is the same. That's basically $1.23 per cinnamon roll. But I also have to add on the labor, and it just gives the answer in these blue cells. So I spend 93, almost 94 cents per cinnamon roll in labor. And then it adds those together. It adds the ingredient cost and the packaging, and then it adds in the labor. And so now we're up to $2.17. And that is one way that you could look at that is to just call that your break even. If I sold that cinnamon roll for $2.17, I would recuperate all my ingredient costs and my packaging costs and my time for standing there, but I didn't make anything on it. So we got to mark it up for profit, like our commenter here said. And I'm sorry I can't see your names. It's part of the way that I stream. You have to grant permission. It's okay. I'd use your first name if I knew it though. So, okay, so now let's start to look at marking it up for profit. So I'd love to hear what you sell your cinnamon rolls for. I'm going to go ahead and put this cinnamon roll in at, I'm going to say, let's see what it looks like if I put it in it, if I sell it for $3.50. So in this cell right here, I just said, let's try selling it for $3.50. And now if you wanted to do this part by hand, you're basically marking it up for profit. And this is a 37.86% markup. So I kind of do it backwards. I say, how much do I want to sell it for? And what's the markup? But if you were doing it with like a pen and paper, you would probably take your cost and then just multiply it by the markup. So you might already say, well, I like to mark things up 40%, and then you'd multiply it by your 40. But the way I do it, I kind of do it in reverse because I like to sort of see what's that perfect sweet spot for this price. Now, I personally have a profit goal for my business or for any bakers that I work with. I recommend that you pick a range for yourself. 40 to 50% profit is a good range to be in. Sometimes you might decide to go a little bit lower, down into the 30% range, especially if you're like pricing for wholesale where somebody else needs to mark it up. You got to lower your profit. Or you might have a higher profit range for just a few of your items. So you don't really have to have everything the exact same profit amount. But for me, I'd like to see that just be a little bit more profit. So let's just go ahead and say this is a $4.50 cinnamon roll right now. You can see that 20% of that price is labor. That's pretty good. 48% is profit or cost of goods sold. So right here, this is the number that we look at, 51%. That's pretty good. But we're not done yet. So the other thing that's missing, someone else guessed it too, is our overhead. And this is the one that gets so confusing. Like, how do you know how to get the overhead into the price that you're selling it for? So I'm going to show you again on my spreadsheet. I'll make my face go away so you can see these tabs here. I'm going to go over into a section that I just call the overhead calculator. And what this does is it just gives you a little place to list all of your regular monthly expenses. And then it's going to take all those expenses and add them over to each recipe that you create. So I'm going to be selling this at the farmer's market, and my farmer's market fees are $30 a month. My business insurance is $19 a month. And I don't really have any other expenses. It's a really simple little farmer's market with business insurance. Now, in order for this to work, I have to say what my sales are per month, because it's taking my overhead and making it a percentage of my sales. So right now, I'm doing $2,000 a month in sales. And it's coming up with this cost that it's going to add to everything that I sell. So if I sell $2,000 worth of stuff, it comes up with the price that covers that for me. And I'll show you over here back in our cinnamon rolls. So now over in our profit section, 11 cents out of the sale of that cinnamon roll needs to go to pay for my overhead. And you can see that my profit dropped down. And that totally makes sense, because the more expenses you have in the business, the more money from the sale of your item needs to go to pay those expenses. Another way to look at it is, if you have a lot of expenses in your business, then you need to raise your prices to cover those. So if you're a farmer's market seller, you might be able to, or you should, sell your cinnamon rolls. There we go. So you should sell your cinnamon rolls for more if you have a lot of farmers market fees than somebody who sells them at a pop-up or maybe like a pre-order from their house, because they have less overhead fees and they could keep more of it for profit because they're not using some of those sales prices to pay off their overhead. So at the end of the day, what we came up with was this recipe for cinnamon rolls that makes 12 cinnamon rolls should sell for $4.50 a roll, and it'll make us about 50% profit. So now would be a great time to start dropping your questions in the comment section, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I have without going too far over on our time. But the main takeaway here is that those rule of thumb pricing strategies do not take into account all of the things that you need to consider. The overhead, labor, and profit that we're missing after we costed out our recipe. So it's more important to just educate yourself and learn these business skills instead of trying to find the best rule of thumb or saying, oh, I saw it in a Facebook group, so it must be true. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who still has to pay your bills. And you're the one who's going to have to justify, is my business making any money yet? And if you're not making money, then how long are you going to be able to do this, right? It's just for fun. If you're just kind of dabbling in it, that's okay. But at some point, you're going to say, I need to make money, or I need to find something else to do with my time that can make money. And if you love baking the way I do, and the way so many of you guys in this group do, then you really want to figure this out early on, because the sooner that you start, the sooner you're going to start to see a profit. And that rule of thumb pricing is only hurting you if you're not making the profit where you can pay yourself at the end of every month. All right, so let's take a look at some questions that you guys have. So being older, I'm having difficulty with the current price structure. You actually feel really guilty. So I want you to know that I totally hear you when you say that. And I have a full training on that. I'll have to like go back into the Facebook group after this live is over and I'll link it to you. I'll comment below your comment right here. But there's a lot of psychology that goes into pricing where we just don't feel good charging the price that a spreadsheet says we need to charge. And so one of the tips that I can give you, sorry, there is a wasp flying right on my screen. That's not fun. That's what I get for opening my windows and getting some fresh air. So one of the problems or the challenges that we have is where we price it from our own perspective. You think, well, I wouldn't pay $5 for a cinnamon roll. So who am I to ask other people to pay $5 for a cinnamon roll? And actually, the challenge there is to flip your thinking and then focus on the value that you provide for someone. They don't have to bake. They have the convenience of, buying from you. They have your expertise that you have to take into account. So you definitely are not alone in feeling like that. And I will find that resource for you because I think I go into like 4 or 5 different mindset hurdles that we have when it comes to pricing your baked goods. So thank you for commenting. And I want to share those tips with you. So this one says, hi, this is great. I like the pricing calculator and know how to make a profit. Great. I'm so glad that you jumped in on today's live and you were able to see this. It does make the profit section of your recipe costing much easier because I don't know about you guys, but like I had to get a lot of help to put that spreadsheet together. If somebody tells me like, this is what you do to mark up for profit, I get it. It's, divide by this, multiply by that, but then I do not remember it when it's time to mark it up. That's why I like the spreadsheet because I just am not like a math in my head person and I don't recall formulas that quickly. I mean, I can memorize a recipe all day long. I have so many recipes in my head, but when it comes to memorizing math formulas, I feel not quite as confident about like on the spot kind of math. And that's why I like the spreadsheet too, because you can just trust that it works. I think I've had over 200 bakers using this spreadsheet. And if you are interested, the link is up in the description. When you purchase it, you don't just get the spreadsheet. You get like a training video and all of the kind of step-by-step getting started techniques, and then a ton of frequently asked questions. And this user says, I have it. It works. It does work. Thank you for that. It totally does work. And let me show you one other thing that's like really awesome about this. So if you remember where we made our inventory list in the beginning, these are just all of the things that we buy in our business. And then we have like these other tabs that have our recipes on them. You just keep stacking up the tabs of recipes. Well, we just entered this cinnamon roll one. And what if my price of butter changed? So right now my 2.8 ounces cost me 31 cents. What if I went over to my spreadsheet? So I currently have my butter in at $4.99 for 16 ounces. What if my butter, we're just going to say, I don't want to jinx it, but what if butter went up to $6.99 a pound? That would be awful. But I used to do that example pre-COVID and I would use $4.99 as my ridiculous price. And now that's like normal. So you can see that when I updated it, it updates it in the recipe. So you don't have to go paper and pen and update all your recipes every time your prices change. So that's how you could use it to save yourself time in your business. Like if you're like me, I would much rather be in the kitchen than doing this kind of stuff. So I sit down every time I come up with a new menu item. I've got 4 or 5 things that I know I need to do. Pricing is definitely one of them. And then once it's done, it's done. If my ingredient costs change, then all I have to do is jump in there and update it really quickly. So Elaine says, I just purchased it and I look forward to incorporating it into my operations. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome, Elaine. I'm so happy that you've found this live today and that worked for you. There's also, just so you know, once you go to purchase it, you use it and you like it, and then you always, let me rephrase this. A lot of people have a more complex scenario than something that looks this straightforward. And I'll give you an example. You have a business where you sell treat boxes with a lot of different items in it. It's got a brownie, it's got some cookies, it's got a cake pop. How do you price that? So once you get started with the pricing calculator, if you want to level up, there are some advanced trainings. It's like $11, and then you get like a whole bunch more trainings where I describe it and talk to you about like how to do it. I also show you how to do multi-tiered recipes, like a cupcake with frosting where you have 2 recipes. In the cinnamon roll recipe, we did everything all in one, right? We had dough, filling, and frosting. But what if it was a cake recipe? Do you really want to, or a cupcake recipe, do you want to enter that same buttercream every time? I don't. I'd rather enter chocolate cake once and then use it in all the different ways in my bakery that I can. And so I'll share with you like how you can do that too. And I actually think that that's one of the ways that this pricing spreadsheet is different than some of the other costing apps that are out there. This is designed for home bakers. And then I walk you through exactly how to price in many different home bakery scenarios, like changing your overhead when you have a lot of expenses from a farmer's market, or creating subscription boxes with mixed price ingredients inside. So I'm glad to hear that you purchased it and you liked it. Even if you're not interested in buying the spreadsheet, at least you know the 5 steps to accurate pricing now. And you can totally do it by hand or put it in your own spreadsheet if you want to. But this is just going to save you a lot of time. And like Elaine said, I'm baking over paperwork 100%. So you're welcome. Thank you for joining in the live. Let's see, I got time for one last one. I'm not new to baking, but I am new to business and purchasing after this live. That is like literally warms my heart, not the purchase part, but the fact that you found this group and new to business is really the essence of why I set this group up. Is that I remember how I felt when I first started. I had all the confidence in the world when it came to baking, but when it came to business, I felt so out of my element. And I wish that I had somebody that would just explain things to me in a way that made sense and didn't take up my entire day as an office person, like a manager. I just really wanted to be in the kitchen baking and then needed these strategies to run my business. So glad you guys joined today. I hope you got a lot out of the training. I know several of you are grabbing the pricing calculator, which is awesome because I know that with that little bit of setup that's required, you're going to then be able to very quickly price your recipes. So if you guys are interested in seeing more videos like this, some lives and some pricing, I'd be happy to jump on and do cookies next week. Maybe even talk through some of those other scenarios that we talked about, like when you sell your cookies in a multi-pack, how do you price those? You know, lots of fun pricing scenarios that I'm happy to share tips for. So thank you for joining the pricing training. This is going to be recorded. So if you wanted to go back and watch it, if you were multitasking and you missed a few things, I'll pin it to the top of the Facebook group. And if you're watching over on YouTube, then I will jump over there and answer any of your questions that you left in the comments. And you guys, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have a great rest of your day.